But we have to do what's required now to protect our economy, and we have to make sure the U.S. knows that we're not going to cower in a corner and hope that someday they'll be nice to us. We're dealing with a bully.
Federal parliamentarian Elizabeth May has decided to weigh in on the trade issue by approaching the media that is controlled by the far left. She has some advice for Canadians. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. Most of you will remember that Donald Trump and the Americans started the tariff situation in Canada by claiming that the border was too porous, that there was a lot of illegal things coming across the border, whether that be items, materials, or people. And they wanted that secured. And then Mark Carney made a bunch of promises that he was going to dump a bunch of money in and that he was going to hire a whole bunch of people that were wholly inadequate. Then rather than fold that into the CBSA, he folded the Coast Guard into the military so that he could try to tell everybody in NATO that he was spending enough money. You see, the Liberal government is spending all of our money in all of the wrong spots. That's a different video. Donald Trump has not seen any progress from Mark Carney, so he has released a letter saying that as a result, the tariffs are going back to where they were. And Elizabeth May, the Green Party member in the federal system, decided that she was going to weigh in on it, and she has two ideas that Canadians should be implementing right away. She doesn't seem to possess much diplomacy. I'll tell you, one of the things that shocked me a little bit is that she's wearing an Order of Canada pin. So I had to look it up. Well, they gave her an Order of Canada because she wrote a book on being an environmentalist. Maybe she should have, stuck to that. I don't know that she's necessarily qualified under the terms of the economy and diplomacy that she's weighing in on in this, what can only be described as a rant. Now, I couldn't show you the whole thing because I would have liked to, because the first part of it, she just meandered around like I'm telling you right now, I don't know who is keeping up with that conversation. But I will leave a link in the description. We'll talk about the two things that she suggests and how, well, you'll just have to see how bad how bad they really are. And in your mind, remember, this is a federal member of Parliament with an Order of Canada pin. You just can't make it up.
I sometimes feel like Sarah Palin when I wake up over there and say, I can see the United States out my window. I see Mount Baker in Washington State due east. But we have to do what's required now to protect our economy, and we have to make sure the U.S. knows that we're not going to cower in a corner and hope that someday they'll be nice to us if we give them all our lunch money. We're dealing with a bully. So what can we do? There are things we can do. So I've suggested this today to Prime Minister Carney. First step, the digital sales tax was passed by Parliament. We so far have essentially press releases and mentions that we're going to remove it, not collect it. We're collecting it. I would urge that the Prime Minister make it clear that the digital sales tax be collected. It's not merely an opportunistic move because these corporations are based in the United States. They have been enriching themselves while robbing us. They have hit different sectors of our economy in ways that have been damaging to the fabric of life in Canada, including through undermining our housing and access to affordable housing through things like Airbnbs. They've undermined the institutions of democracy, particularly in journalism, through things like the ability to have classified ads under Kijiji and Craigslist that have replaced the #1 source of revenue to most of the newspapers in Canada. We accepted a lot of what was digital as benign, and it's very clear, and we're not the only country around the world that sees this, that we need to get a hold of this. So I think reversing the earlier decision to appease Trump by removing the digital services tax, Parliament hasn't repealed the law. The law is there. We collect the digital services tax. It augments, as the parliamentary budget officer has found, it gets us billions of dollars a year.
You cannot appreciate the profound lack of situational awareness that this woman just put on display. I mean, I want to start with her saying that Donald Trump's not going to take our lunch money because he's a bully. Just understand that she's saying because he's putting tariffs on his country, that somehow is bullying her and her friends, and that's taking their lunch money. she demands that he remove those tariffs. She doesn't have anything to offer. She has only threats to offer. So that she and her friends can make money off the Americans, so they can take their lunch money. I mean, you can't make up how out of touch this person is to her very own words. The lack of situational awareness is staggering. This is supposed to be a federal member. Well, not supposed to be. This is a federal member of parliament talking like she has no idea what's going on around her. Then this next lovely level of diplomacy coming out of her, saying that, no. We're not going to stop the digital sales tax because that means that Kijiji is going to be able to run more ads. Now, if we just leave aside for 1 second the digital sales tax and begin to understand that people put up ads on Kijiji because it has a farther reach, and people went away from their paper because the Kijiji was there. So why did their papers with their classified ads not have a counter to the market? Why is it that the Americans could put up this website for all of these classified ads and the people in Canada couldn't start one, couldn't do one on their own? Do you believe for 1 second that people will not go to one that's Canadian funded, Canadian made, Canadian, all this and the rest of it? Let's look at some of the reasons why the tech industry is in the United States and not in Canada. Why it is. Well, it's easier to run a business in the United States than it is in Canada. There's no socialism down there clawing away at all of their excess profits. I mean, I suppose in California, but you will notice that all of the tech companies moved out of California and are now in Texas and Nashville and Florida, where they get better tax rates. Now, we can say that Elizabeth May is clearly just lashing out and hoping that people will understand why her little community paper is no longer being offered to her at her local coffee shop. And that's great if you're just a local person gossiping in coffee shop, but this is a federal member of the parliament lashing out at a leader of another country over a tax that she says the parliamentary budgetary officer will raise billions of dollars. Now, in her mind, she wants you to think that it's going to be Facebook paying up that $1 billion. But let's be straightforward. Facebook is only going to charge that to the person that's placing the ad, to the person that's running the thing. Instagram, the same deal. YouTube, the same deal. Anybody that tries to do business on X or Blue Sky or any of the Kijiji or any of the ones that come into the country, they're just going to now raise the cost 3% on you and I. You and I are paying Elizabeth May these billions of dollars. That doesn't seem to be in her mind, this Order of Canada author who is a member of parliament. Doesn't seem to understand the basic concept and tenement of taxation and how Donald Trump is down in the United States offering a 15% corporate tax rate across the board compared to Canada where it's nearly 50. Without all of the other costs. Don't forget there's the application fees, and then there's the regulation fees, and then there's the annual fees, and then there's the renewals of the license fees. All of that stuff is coming out of your and I pocket. That's the cost of doing business. Meanwhile, they can go down into the States and take care of it for pittance, making everyone and their shareholders more money, making it available so that their employees can get a raise, making all of the people that are associated with that company prosperous. Meanwhile, Elizabeth May, and I would remind you, federal MP, has decided that you and I should give the government more tax dollars so that they can charge the digital sales tax against the United States. And she further thinks that it's not Mark Carney buckling to Donald Trump. It's that these companies are coming in and trying to exploit us. Meanwhile, the companies said to Donald Trump, they also said it to Biden, P.S. She had no problem putting it on pause when it was Biden. Hey, Mr. Biden, these guys are going to put that on there, and we pay a lot of taxes and we hire a lot of people, so can you do something about that? And they called him up. They got a text message. So where in your mind, Elizabeth May, do you think anything that you just said is anything other than making you look like you don't have a single solitary grasp of the situation going on and how your solutions are only going to harm and target Canadians?
We also can show the United States that we are not powerless. Trump has said there's nothing in Canada that the United States needs. So let's take him at his word. It's hardly then a hostile act to say we're not sending you some of those resources. We'll start with a strategic reserve of potash. It happens that that's one of the Green Party planks that was reviewed by the Parliamentary Budget Office. We know exactly what it will cost to do this. We know exactly how it can be set up. And we know that the benefit will be that Canadians will be able to buy bonds to invest in what we're calling not Canada savings bonds, but Saving Canada bonds. Buy a bond, got a guaranteed 5% rate of return on your investment, absolutely only available to Canadian individuals, not to banks or brokers. And this will be an investment fund that can buy up the potash, so the potash producers are not disadvantaged by Trump's 10% tariff, the existing tariff on potash. But we know that in the United States, farmers, particularly that whole group of corn and ethanol producers who have deep roots in the U.S. Republican Party, that represents a other vulnerable fleshy spot in Trump's bullying tactics. We need to bite deep there so that he feels some pain and decides it would be a good idea to start actually reducing tariffs on Canada to get some relief from us about whether we're going to let them have and sell potash back to the United States. For now, we protect the potash producers by buying it into a strategic reserve for Canadians. And again, Canadians can help us raise the funds to do that. Again, I stress that this was costed by the Parliamentary Budget Office during the 2025 election at the request of the Green Party. So we're confident that these moves will make sense, that they're doable, they're strategic, and they can be done quickly.
Well, there you have it, everybody. I mean, I don't know why it didn't occur to me in the first place that all of you should now send your money to Ottawa so they can put it into a bond and pay you a 5% return. Not the banks, not any of the corporations, not any of the foreign investors, just Canadian people who already are suffering and have no money to spend, are trying to figure out how they can feed themselves and pay the rent and go to sleep at night without the dread and concern of fiscal problems that are plaguing everyone under the middle class every day. Obviously, Elizabeth May has the solution to that. You should just give up money you don't have to buy bonds that you can't afford, to sit and watch as that money sits around and purchases all the potash, the potash that somehow in her mind is going to cause a lot of problems to the ethanol manufacturers in the United States. Now, one of the interesting things about the ethanol in the United States is that Mark Carney was one of the people that was the person that negotiated the deal to have ethanol put into any fuel flying into the British Isles. So actually, when you target the ethanol producers, you target Mark Carney's bottom line. That's just how out of the loop Elizabeth May seems to be. She's telling you that you should give more money to the federal government, despite the fact of everybody telling her you don't have any money. 5 years ago, they decided that the problem with the potash was going to be how they justified raising food prices, right? Global supply chain. You heard them screaming it all up and down when they were doing the lockdown. So many of these individual outfits have already secured quite a large supply. And you say, no, they didn't buy that much. Well, the thing about it is that Ukraine has an enormous amount of potash. And when Donald Trump was talking about Ukraine giving up its natural resources in exchange for the money and the munitions and whatnot that the Americans are sending into Ukraine, potash was right at the top. Potash and uranium, both of the things that kind of come out of Saskatchewan. What I found astounding was that Elizabeth May is asking the Saskatchewanians to take the hit, not the people in British Columbia. For example, you know how the people in British Columbia say that Donald Trump is a bully for putting a tariff on anything inside of his country, to say anything that comes into his country he has control over, while at the same time they decided that inside of British Columbia's waters they're not allowing any tankers. They're not allowing any large tankers to take out the oil out of Alberta. Now, that oil coming out of Alberta would go a long way. Would also raise billions of dollars, Miss May. It would go an enormous way to taking away the supplies and getting the reliance on the American market. All you have to do is stop telling yourself that there is a ban on any of the shipping tankers that are not permitted to come into the waters of British Columbia, because the British Columbia government has decided that it's their region, and they are the only ones that can decide who and what goes there. Much like you hear Donald Trump saying it's his region and he's the one that can decide what and who and what goes where. Out of touch, right? And it's not like they want British Columbia to take that hit so that they can, solve the problem with getting the pipeline done. No. They want Saskatchewan to do something about it. They want Ontario to do something about it. They want PEI to do something about it. The people in Newfoundland who have the highest unemployment rate in the country, nearly 12%, they're the ones that are supposed to be buying Save Canada bonds. Federal member, leader of a political party, clearly not a mathematician. Clearly no idea how diplomacy works. Clearly not looking to solve the problem herself, expecting other people to do it, other people to shoulder the burden. This is a real problem in Canadian politics. It's only the Conservative Party that talks about taking responsibility for their own behavior. Everybody else is all like, well, maybe somebody else should do something about it. Maybe somebody else should wait a little while longer. Maybe the Canadian people haven't suffered enough. Maybe the Canadian people can do without a little bit more. While I fly private jets around and tell you that it's okay for me to pick fights with foreign leaders, strongest economy, strongest military on earth, I'm going to pick a fight with them because Saskatchewan is going to cut off the potash so that Saskatchewan can also be broke. But don't worry about it. We're going to take the money from the people in Nova Scotia, give it to the guys in Saskatchewan, and all the while British Columbia could lift that ban on the tanker ban and Bill C-69, and we could get all kinds of billions of dollars flowing into this country. Completely tone deaf. All because they don't like Donald Trump. She had no problem with the digital sales tax being put on pause when it was Biden. This isn't about America versus Canada versus any of it. This isn't about understanding the position that Donald Trump is in, because if they did, they would understand that putting a ban on tankers is exactly the same thing as putting a tariff on British Columbia wine, British Columbia apples, British Columbia produce going into the state of Washington. Oh, but it's different, you see. No. When it's them, when it's her that has to make the sacrifice, when it's her that has to make the adjustment. No, it's the people in Saskatchewan. They have to do more. They're not doing enough. And all the while, nobody is talking about the canola tariffs coming out of China, because Mark Carney is clearly in bed with China, as at least 103 of his conflict of interest, most of them are going to be doing their manufacturing in China. It's unbelievable, the state of this country. And one of the biggest reasons that the country is this way is because we keep electing people who have no idea what they're doing. This is what happens when you elect an activist instead of electing a person who is capable and qualified to lead the way. All right, I'm going to wrap here. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.